The information and opinions presented in this podcast are for general information only. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and in no way are meant to be taken as case facts. We do not have knowledge of any persons being listed as a suspect and are in no way pointing to any individual as being guilty of a crime. Hello, and welcome to Curious Conversations. I am your host, Carly, and joining me today for part two of Vanished, the Search for Keeslyn Roberts is Connie Hall Scott. Connie, thank you so much for being here today. And thank you for introducing me to this case, but also to the Roberts, the family. You've done a lot of work with them. You've had a lot of, interaction with them. They're just the kindest, sweetest family. Hey, you were recently on the Nancy Grace show also discussing the details of this case. Um, can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, I want to say thanks for having me on. Um,
Ah,
Loved working on this case, largely with you and Tamala Parker Painter. Um,
yep.
Gosh, we follow so many leads. And how this really got started for me was I believe I saw a newspaper article and within days, and I reached out to Eric Roberts and offered to have him on my show, which was the Talk with Connie, as well as North Georgia News Now. And I've done a lot of reporting, as you said, on television with the Roberts and about the Keeslyn case. And I believe that is why a producer from or Crime Scenes with Nancy Grace reached out and invited me to be on, I believe it was their second show about Keeslyn. And that was, a great experience. I think Nancy Grace does so much in bringing attention to cases like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Mandy and I talked a little last week about the highlights of the case, the basic details. Listeners, if you missed that episode, you're going to want to go back and check it out because it really lays the groundwork for these next two episodes. But, we talked about Nancy Grace and she's just really, she's a bulldog with these
Mm.
cases. And really knows how to get the word out there. And I just think it's the coolest thing that you were able to go and experience that. And you did a phenomenal job. You did a great job on that. So,
Thank you. I had some
um,
this difficulties right before we went on that just almost drove me crazy. I had to resort to headphones, and
oh no.
I was so like discombobulated with it. I think one of them was turned the wrong way, and you can see it on there. But it was just like last minute issue that had to be fixed. But um, the takeaway from the Nancy Grace thing is that she brought other experts in and she really lays everything out. And when it was over, she said, "Hey, if you get any more leads or you get anything, let me know and come back on and we'll do more."
Oh,
And I
oh,
like
I
that.
love it.
I saw her do that with other cases like John Benet Ramsey and so
Mhm.
many after that. That I always said from the beginning, gosh, I wish Nancy Grace would get hold of this. And she did. So that makes me happy.
Yeah, I love that she'll do the follow-up. It's not just a here, let me put it out there and see how many views I can get from it. It's,
Yeah,
it's a hey, we're gonna work on this. And so I think that's wonderful.
I do too. She's
Well,
phenomenal.
today we're talking. I'm so sorry. What'd you say?
Oh, I just said she's phenomenal.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Today we're talking about the days leading up to Keeslyn's disappearance. And we all know that, well, you and I know, that there was a timeline. That timeline was leaked and then later it was kind of tweaked. It's obvious that there's just something about it was probably started by law enforcement as it does contain information that I'll say only officials should have access to. But it has some added in rambling that is obviously not law enforcement. So Connie, you've seen this timeline as well. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, like you, that it was started by law enforcement and that someone got hold of it. And
Mhm.
it's clearly two different voices. Um, One is more formal, which would be law enforcement. The other is, hey, what can I put in here to whatever the person, whoever they were, whatever their purpose was. It's clear that it has been altered.
Yeah, I think it's telling. I was actually surprised at some of the details that you can see. You can tell when she friended someone or unfriended someone or took a, screenshot on Snapchat. Those things that you think just disappear may not always just disappear.
Oh, yes.
Uh, but you can tell those parts were obvious that that's not a standard person out in the general population just able to pull that information up. That's definitely a law enforcement thing. But you do have, some ramblings in there. And so it's hard not to get, kind of off track with that. There's just so much to look into. But also I feel like it could be telling because who is adding that and what is their intention behind that? If you could just get into the mind of the person that altered that document, you could kind of figure out, okay, what is their purpose in doing so.
Hmm. Yeah, because part of it sounds very well put together. It's the facts. This happened at this time and this date. And that's more of the way that law enforcement does things. And then someone else is just like putting things in that sounds like something you'd read off of Facebook or something. And so you have to ask, like you said, why are they doing that? Who is doing this? And it would be self serving. Because
Yes,
they want to draw the attention perhaps to a different direction than where it might be going. I know
that's it right
it's
there.
evasive to all of our listeners because you don't know exactly what's on the timeline. And you and I have discussed should we just read it out? And there's some hesitancy because um, we don't know how much of it has been added on, and we don't want to put I guess, guesses out there and make it seem like this came from law enforcement when probably part of it did not.
Right. Yeah. There's definitely well, you've got to be careful because like you said, you don't want to say something is on a law enforcement timeline and it was something that was added. It's just, I've gone back and forth on how much do you share, how much do you not share? There's a fine
Mhm.
line I think to walk in that. But
Absolutely. And gosh, the more you and I both get tips a lot, and Tamala does as well.
mhm.
And some of them are outrageous. Others are like, hey, we're going to go follow this. And we do. We try to figure it out. But uh, one thing leads to another, and the rabbit hole gets bigger and bigger. And it
Yep.
becomes more kind of almost like a marsh. It's like what it's you get some good facts and then you get a whole lot of I'm not sure about this.
Yeah, and I think even maybe a little bit of a here, let's look over here, pay attention over here to keep, eyes off of over here.
Mhm.
And so you wonder how much of that is just actual leads and how much of it is, just trying to clear someone's name or you never know. It's tangled. I'll say it that way. Feels very
Yeah,
tangled.
yeah. There's a lot of different people that Keeslyn had gotten involved with that pulls it in different directions. Could it be drugs? Could it be human trafficking? Could it be I made this person really angry? Or could it be that she had information about multiple things, really? Multiple things she had information on that could have gotten her in trouble
Yep.
and clearly did.
That's right. Yeah. Well, okay, so let's talk about that. Keeslyn, she did struggle with some drug use, which can't be ignored because it really does bring a whole other set of potential suspects and things that you can't leave out. It raises some questions about like who might have had interest in Keeslyn's activities. I know you've got some theories that you feel strongly about. Do you
Mhm.
want to share your thoughts on that?
Sure. And I could be totally off base because I have multiple theories, but one that feels more solid to me is that, and I know you're going to be doing more information on Caleb Smith, who did die. Um,
Right.
but I won't go too far into that. But I do want to say that I strongly feel that there is some sort of link between Caleb Smith and Keeslyn Roberts. And the reason for that to me is that well, they were both interested in drugs, probably on different levels at different times. Their parents, their family doesn't believe the two knew each other. And maybe they did, or maybe they did not. But the similarities are just in a nutshell. Caleb goes missing on I believe it's the 16th of January, 2020. He is seen at the Flying J. That's the last time we know where he was. There's a lot of mystery to that I know you'll get into in another episode. But
Sure.
the takeaway for me is that, okay, he goes missing. His car is backed into a spot at the Flying J where there are not many lights, poor lighting, and no cameras, kind of like at the back side of Denny's. So that's definitely something. In his case, that his car was backed in. Okay, 2 days later, also at Denny's Flying J, Keeslyn is there. She has an altercation that we'll talk about, I guess, today in the kitchen, and she's scared. These things are going on. Then she's gone. She disappears. Maybe a few days after that, even, and this is on the 20th, January 20th, when she is last seen. Um, Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's maybe a day or two later that Eric Roberts finds out that her car too is backed in at the back of Denny's, and it's only 5 spaces from where Caleb's car was. Okay, that's really, really odd. It's odd. That's something of a connection. They both go missing. One is found dead, which is Caleb, in a very mysterious manner. And then
Mhm.
Eastland is not, to this day we don't know where she is, but that alone is a connection. Well, my kind of theory that I'm working with is that there's a drug connection there. Perhaps Caleb, we don't know what happened. There's a lot of things leading up to this point, but he's found dead, and later his autopsy shows that it was from methamphetamine. um,
Yep.
okay, and Keeslyn started out with marijuana, but there's room to believe that she was experimenting with methamphetamine. So this is the area they went missing in North Georgia is heavy for drugs, and especially meth and heroin. Um, so could it be that they were getting their drugs from the same source or from the same people, or at least they did this one time? Because Caleb's looking for money, right, at the Flying J. He says it's for gas. He has plenty enough gas to get where he's going and back. So he's looking for money. He goes and asks this guy for money. He needs money for something. Is it party drugs or is it just a fix? I don't know. But what we do know is his body ended up somewhere under mysterious circumstances. His
Mhm.
clothes, shoes, da da da, was never found. You can get into that more if you want to. But could it be that Keeslyn, 2 days before she went missing, when Caleb went missing, could she have been somewhere? Could she have known what happened with Caleb? Maybe even been involved in like being there when the body's being taken, because it has been transported from one location to another, and she knows. And maybe the people who feel responsible or perhaps are responsible are afraid that Keeslyn's going to run her mouth. She's going to talk, because she talks a lot, as young people do, as all people do. So are they thinking, I'm worried that she's going to lead it back to us? We're going to get in trouble, so we're going to shut her up. Um,
Right.
to me, I don't know what that looks like. Does it mean just take her away and talk to her and scare her, or does it mean something far more sinister? I'm not sure, but that's kind of where my best guess goes to.
Yeah, it's really hard to look at those 2 cases and say, "Oh, they're not connected in
Mhm.
any way, shape." It's just you can't do it. The timeline is too tight. The location. In our last episode, we did talk about, the day that Keeslyn went missing, but in that we did some pans of the Flying J and the parking lot, and kind of pointed out where she was parked, and he was parked 5 spots down. So you
Yeah.
tell me, backed in the same way. Um, Way too many similarities there. And I think, no, there's not been a connection that's been found. Law enforcement is, adamant that they are not connected. But, I think you and I have talked about it before. You don't keep your drug dealer on your cell phone by their name. So just because we can't connect them doesn't mean there's not something there. It doesn't even mean that they knew one another. Maybe they just had that contact, you know, in that they both knew. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's
Yeah.
hard to rule out that there was some kind of connection there.
Yeah, and they grew up or around the same street.
Yeah.
They're in there. I believe it's Caleb's grandmother and sorry, and Keeslyn, her home, her family
Mhm.
home, if I remember correctly.
I think it was where she was staying.
Okay, okay. So there's
Yeah.
proximity connection there,
Mhm. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
yeah.
Well, we
Mhm.
know we know that a month before her disappearance, Keeslyn was arrested, and she spent 30 days, I believe, in Whitfield County. I think originally I thought Murray, but I believe it was Whitfield. So let's talk about the events that led to her arrest. We know that she was originally picked up because she took something from a hospital gift shop. The gift shop chose not to press charges, but she was held anyway. It was because of a prior issue. We know that she wasn't alone at this time. She was arrested with another person.
Mhm.
This person had lost someone that they were close to earlier that day. That was ruled as an accident, although there are, I'll say, a lot of questions raised about the incident by friends and family members of the deceased. And these are family members that reached out to Keeslyn because they believed that she had more information about that particular event. And that's, that is in that timeline from
Mhm.
law enforcement that's been tweaked. But as far as we know, Keeslyn did not have time to speak with them, the deceased family members before she went missing. And I've spoken to those family members who believe Keeslyn's disappearance is tied to the event of their loved one. With this information and the fact that she did seem scared that day at the Flying J. She was running from someone or something. I feel you just can't rule out that she might have known something that
Mhm.
led to her disappearance. Do you have
Right.
any thoughts on that?
I do, and stop me if I go too far. I will say that the person who died was a female, and she was with her partner, another female, that was friends, I would say, with Keeslyn. Um, and you could, I mean, anybody can look this up. So I think it's okay to start to say, but stop me again if I'm going too far. The partners, the two ladies, were on the side of a road, on the side of the interstate, and the one partner who was living said that the other partner walked out into in front of traffic, and that's what killed her. And there was carnage everywhere. It was terrible. And then she starts walking. The partner who's left starts walking down the road, I believe, with dogs. I've talked to this person, by the way, on the phone after she reached out a couple of times. And
Yeah.
that's really how Keeslyn got involved. She got called to pick up her friend who witnessed what happened to her partner at Hamilton Medical Center. And this person told me, I'm just going to call her T. This person, T, told me that Keeslyn was concerned about her. She had, like blood on her clothes and she's not clean. And she was cold outside. And so she went back in and grabbed a sweatshirt or a hoodie or something out of Hamilton. I guess she didn't have money and was just in crisis mode. And so that's how law enforcement got involved there.
Mm.
So yeah, that's a very traumatic thing, and it was something that Keeslyn knew about. Some say witnessed. I don't know that to be a fact, but she was involved in some way in that case.
Right, right. Well, and I've heard that also from family members that Keeslyn may have been present and witnessed that happening. That is a very easy fix because it was a transfer truck that was
Mhm.
involved in the accident, and those have
Yeah.
cameras. And so
Oh
that would
yeah.
be an easy way to disprove that or prove that. Um, in speaking with the family, it sounded to me like they didn't understand their rights or what they could do, but they
Hmm.
have very strong feelings about it. I don't have strong feelings about it because I don't have solid facts. I don't have that. I have the police report, but I don't have the video from the truck. I don't. you know, I don't have any of that. And so, I don't know, but I think just making sure that you look at every possible answer, and I know that this person you've referred to as T, there are some threatening text messages in that timeline also. So why not just disprove it? And if you want to move on, that's something
Yeah,
that you disproved.
that's a good point about the camera, because I do think that if there was foul play, if T, for example, as it has been said, pushed her partner in traffic, I think that she would be in jail now. Of course, I don't know
Yeah.
the circumstances. Um, it's just something that is a very big deal that happened to Keeslyn, who's 20 years old. And you're pulled into this. You've got these drug problems. You've got law enforcement problems. You're having a little bit of trouble with your family who doesn't necessarily agree with your choices, but a family
Mhm.
who loves you very much. She's 20. She's got relationship issues going on, and um, hmm, Eric and Tammy, not Tammy, I'm sorry, Eric and Shannon, the parents, have always said that toward the end, Keeslyn was really trying to distance herself from some of the people in her life, whether it's boyfriends or whatever else, um, and try to live a more safe life, a happy
Right.
life. And I don't know. That's the hard part of it. She's a 20-year-old girl and going through these things, and where is she now?
Yeah, she was so young and going through more than I've been through in my 40 something years. I mean, it was just, she's got a lot going on at the time and, you know, her mind is probably very scattered. She's dealing with some things. She's wanting to get cleaned up. She's wanting to kind of take her life back. Um, there's something else that's added on top of all of that that she's already dealing with. So after her arrest from the hospital, she ended up, I believe that arrest was a drug charge. I'm not sure, but she's released 30 days later. She spends
Hmm.
30 days in Whitfield and then she's released. Within days of her release, she is questioned by Gordon County. Do you know why she was being questioned?
I have theories, but I don't know why. I think that some people around her were informants. Um,
Mhm.
there was some of that going in, and was some agency trying to bring her in? I'm not going to say which one because I don't know. It's just a question. Was someone trying to get her to be an informant, which is a very dangerous thing to be? But she had connections to, as you know, some people. How do we say, detective, correct, who
Yes.
she had contact with, who claims that he didn't know her. However, he made a donation to Eric Roberts' GoFundMe for Keesel, for information leading up to Keeslin's whereabouts. He made a donation to that and said that he didn't know her. However, we've seen texts that he sent her. He didn't know her. Was he,
Yeah.
did he go rogue? Was he kind of like doing things he shouldn't have been done? I don't know. But that's another big question mark and certainly a possibility.
Yeah, it's there is a huge question mark there of, why would someone in law enforcement reach out to on Facebook? I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a big question mark there.
And
It doesn't make sense to me. Doesn't seem that it
yeah.
would be protocol.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't seem
Um,
totally straight.
yeah, it seems like something's a little off. Um, so there's that question, but also, if I think bringing her in, Gordon County bringing her in on like the tail of her Whitfield County release, that would have looked very suspicious to a drug dealer who might have thought like Keeslyn was willing to share information that she was privy to. Is that a possibility that like maybe someone panicked thinking that she was going to talk to law enforcement and thought, well, I'll just take that out, take out the possibility that she'll talk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's irresponsible. I understand you've got to set some people up. I'm 100% with law enforcement in most cases. I know it gets tricky, and But, there's also gotta be some protection on the back end. If you make it look like that, you've gotta realize you've made it look like that. And she didn't have that protection, and so we can't rule out that it wasn't just a drug bust setup that
Mm.
went terribly wrong, and she paid the price for it.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be that. And she did spend time in the Murray County Jail as well. Now, all of this originally was for marijuana, and then later on, some
Mhm.
drug paraphernalia. And I'm not sure if there was meth actually, I can't recall, but if there was meth actually found, or that we know that she had been doing it. Um, I think largely, just like her parents think, that she had gotten into some circles that were not healthy for her.
Right. Yeah, 100%. We know that. I think she was too innocent for the circle she was trying to run with, for sure, and maybe, didn't know how to navigate certain situations. Um, know if I've shared this with you before, but in keeping with the theory of, being released and then picked right back up to
Mhm.
talk with other law enforcement, I looked up every major drug bust in that time period. Um, for Murray, for Gordon, for Whitfield,
Mhm.
just kind of digging into those to see, was that a law enforcement setup? And they got a great bust out of it, but Keeslyn paid the price. There was a bust in Murray County after her disappearance, and of the ones that were arrested, two of them lived on that same street where Keeslyn was staying on when she went missing.
Mm.
One that Caleb lived on.
Mhm.
And there are so many things that tie together that you really could go like on and on with these off the wall theories. And so, I don't know that that means anything at all. It was a bad area. There would have been, multiple people in that area that messed with drugs. But I thought that was definitely curious. That
Yes.
was strange for me. But
Absolutely. And
well,
I know that the Murray County Sheriff, um, Jimmy Davenport, is really trying to get the drugs more out of this area. He's really
mm,
pushed. That's a thing for him. He's done some amazing things with breaking up. I mean, gosh, that he'd be a story. He'd be a great story. Um,
yeah, it's all the time you see him standing in front of there's a desk behind him and just
mhm.
drugs just piled up. So he's definitely doing some work on that for sure.
Yeah. One thing that kind of was a controversy for a minute some years back was that after Keeslyn went missing on Murray County, they chose to put her mugshot on instead of some of the lovely pictures of her just as a one of our citizens in this area who's, a young lady. I didn't like that. I didn't like that that happened. I asked Jimmy about that when he was at the TV station on a totally different matter, and I think that his feeling might have been that, you know, people needed to know that she wasn't just a Pollyanna. I mean, I can't say that. Well, I think I'll stop there. But I don't think it matters if you're a Pollyanna or if you're someone who's had problems, who's been in jail a few times, who's made some bad choices. It doesn't matter. I don't think that and I'm not saying this about Davenport, but any law official or organization who works for the people, why is it okay to put more emphasis on searching for this one Pollyanna, and then, oh, she just made bad choices, she's run away, kind of thing that happened with Keeslyn? I don't care if she made bad choices. She's a daughter. She's a friend. She's a human being that needs to be searched for. And we're 5 years down the road now. Most of the leads
Right.
are cold. I mean, I would say that they're cold, wouldn't you? I mean, we're still getting
Yeah.
in, but it's harder and harder to find out what's really going on. For example, you mentioned, shouldn't the car have been fingerprinted? Shouldn't it have been? I think that it should have been, or at least separated for a while until you decide if it needs to be. So
Mhm.
all of those clues are gone now. All the clues that could have possibly came from her car, which we know that she's not the last one who drove it because it was in a different seating position than Keeslyn's height. And we know
Right.
things were put into the dashboard that she wouldn't have normally put in there. So there was some tampering, and there was certainly some tampering with Caleb's car and Caleb's body. So somebody's pulling strings behind the scenes. And the big question is who? Who's doing this? And you and I have, some suspects or a lot of people, persons of interest, and we're not privy to what law enforcement has most of the time, and they're not saying things perhaps for good reasons. Maybe they know plenty of things we don't know, and
Sure.
they're not at liberty to say. So this is just a really deep case with so many possibilities.
It is, and you kinda get stuck in that place of, you know, is law enforcement dropping the ball, or are they working on stuff that
Sure,
they're not able to share,
sure.
we would mess up. So,
Yeah,
you know,
and
but you're just left with no answers.
yeah, yeah, we're still trying because I feel like the family needs closure, the community does, and if that means that, I don't think this is the case, but she's out there hiding somewhere because she's scared to death of what could happen. I still don't see her not 5 years in reaching out to some family members, because these are the people that took care of her, who loved her, regardless if they're having any disagreements over lifestyles or whatever. Your mom and your dad, it'd be hard to not reach out to them.
Right, right. Well, let's talk for a minute about Flying J. We actually tried to enter the kitchen area of the Flying J,
We did.
in hopes of seeing where she was found crouching behind the counter. We kind of tried to, reenact and recreate that day. We were all over Flying J and Denny's, but we were very quickly asked to leave the area.
Yeah.
I want to know what stood out to you that day.
Well, one thing that has always stood out to me about the Flying J is I feel like, um, it almost seems like, forgive me if I'm wrong, but they don't really much care. They gave Eric a hard time about putting a poster up, in fact, did not allow it. Um, their employees are not allowed to speak to anyone about it. Well, first of all, I never have told my employees, you don't talk about this, you don't talk about that. Because if I'm saying that, there's probably some things I don't want them to say, and it's not my right to take their speech away. So um, that's bizarre. I think that's really bizarre. One thing that I did notice the day you're talking about, when you and me and Tammy went there to the Flying J, we're just kind of looking around. It's not the first time any of us have been there. And it's pretty well guarded, I want to say. There's not like a
Mhm.
guard standing there, but there are people walking around and making sure that you are not in that area. It's not really what I thought it would look like. I kind of envisioned something different. Um, but it's a kitchen. There's a little alley, sort of, I want to say alleyway, sort of, that leads into that area when you get behind those doors, of where I guess there's supplies and the cooking and that stuff happens. We didn't get that far. Um, but I did.
Nope.
We wanted to take a look and, um, you know, to see, well, why was she in there? We know that she had dropped off her friend, who she was also living with, and she also had a romantic relationship with his cousin. And some speculate that she had a relationship with this friend, although this friend has clearly told me straight up, we did not have a romantic relationship. I didn't know her that well. I knew her through my friend slash cousin. So, and what happened was, as you probably mentioned in part one, she dropped him off there at work. So why did she go on in? And why did she take her bag? Um, why was she in the kitchen area of not Denny's, but the Flying J? Why would you, why would you go in there? And then hiding, she's hunkered down behind something, and she's hiding. And then there's a confrontation that may be as simple hey girl, why are you in here?
Mhm.
And then she gets all upset. I don't know what words were exchanged, but then she flees the situation, the place. And that's the last time we see her. She leaves some things behind. She's so scared that she leaves behind her bag. I mean,
Right.
there's
Yep.
she wasn't having a happy day. And I'll go even further and say that we have reason to believe that she was at the home of a couple, um, in the Bracket Ridges, which will come up more. And she was upset. It was raining some that day. She was on the phone. She went outside and she was crying and having an argument with someone. We don't know who. So obviously she's already not having a good day. And this is 2 days after Caleb went missing. So is this connected to Caleb? Is she trying to figure out what to do with something she knows, or is it something completely different? Um, that's the thing. There are so many different things it could be. I don't think she's just running
Yeah.
from not showing up at probation. There were things going on there that kept her like, I know we need to go to probation. If we have probation, go to your meetings. But if these other really dramatic, traumatic life things are going on around her, I don't think it's that weird that she missed an appointment. That some people
Yeah.
think that she's just running, but you're not going to run from something like that for 5 years.
Exactly right. Yeah. And there's, you could really just get off in the weeds with it, but there's so many different scenarios that come to mind, but yeah, something was definitely off. It was not just I'm frustrated about an appointment or gosh, it's raining out. It was I need to get away from something or I need help. There was definitely some desperation there. For me, there's a level of frustration in the fact that law enforcement wasn't able to do more in the beginning.
Me
So,
too.
this case is weird. It's a missing persons case, not a crime committed case. That being said, there's a lot of talk about which agency should have covered the case. Being that it was missing persons, it would divert to the agency from the person's hometown at the time of their disappearance. However, many do think that Gordon County should have done more because Flying J is in their jurisdiction. I have some strong opinions on that. The family does
Mhm.
too, but I am curious to hear your thoughts on it. You've shared a little bit, but it's even like the backpack that she dropped wasn't processed. Why? Why didn't we look into that?
I don't know, and I've never thought until this moment. I mean, could it have even been that something was taken out of her backpack? I'm just throwing that wildly out there. It may not be,
Yeah.
but I do think that if I owned the Flying J, and I have no experience in that type of business at all, but if I owned it and there was someone who went missing from there, I
Mm.
would be all over that. I would be, yes, put your posters up. Come on in. Welcome, law enforcement. Welcome, family. I'm going to answer everything you've got and not worry about how it's going to make me look because I'm not going to say the Flying J in specific, but in general, things go on at truck stops a lot. There are people who are driving all around the nation. They're coming through here, and that's another thing. Could she have ran out and then? And this is again a wild theory. I'm not backed by anything I've very much thought out. Um, but could she have ran out and a trucker been like, "Hey, what's wrong, girl? You want to just come get in my cab for a little while. I've got this thing. Nobody's going to find you back here." Could something
Yep.
like that have happened? We hope not, but that's another possibility.
Yeah, but the problem in that is that it wasn't dealt with in the moment. So in that moment, and I mentioned this in the last episode, people have dash cams, especially
Yeah.
truckers. Why weren't there efforts into pulling those dash cams to see you can see the back door to Denny's from the truck parking lot. Um, if we would have been on it a little bit sooner, it seems like we could have gotten some more answers. And I know I've said it before, but it seems as though, these two agencies, it's Gordon County and Murray County, it's like they were shoving her file back and forth on
Hmm.
like their proverbial desks, trying to get the other to pick it up. And I do believe it comes back to protocol. There's a system that has to be followed, but I think that might be a very, very flawed system. But a system, no doubt. Now it's being handled by GBI. I almost feel like it's too late in the game for GBI.
Yeah.
At this point, the car should have been processed. Her laptop with her email and social media accounts, those should have been looked into by law enforcement before, a regular person that I know is the one that started unlocking her computer.
Hmm.
Her backpack and its contents should have been taken into evidence. Her clothes that appeared by the dumpster a month later
Hmm.
were not processed. Her parents have them.
Yeah.
That to me is shocking because they didn't look like they had been there for a month. They were folded and cleaned. I asked Shannon, what condition were they in? Um, why weren't those processed?
Well, I think there's a lot more to that too, and because we know how the Robert, Shannon, and Eric, Keeslyn's parents, found out that the clothes were there is because an employee of the Flying J um, called and said, "You need to go back there and look." So they
Hmm.
did, and they found some pieces that did belong to her, as well as some pieces they weren't familiar with. Um,
Yes.
and the police were called. The police come in, and it's like, okay, maybe they're Keeslings, maybe they're not. They're not. Are they taking it seriously? I don't know. But why, like you said, a month later, this
Mhm.
employee, she just feels bad about the situation. It sounds like the clothes were placed there because I'm thinking we've looked at that dumpster area and it's not just like all messy, like you're just going to leave stuff laying around. It looks like it's pretty well maintained and picked up. So those clothes were at some point probably placed there, and then this employee knows about it and she calls. I tried to contact her and was told, don't ever call me again, I could lose my job. And I understand that, and I wouldn't have said her name anyway, but I was trying to find out what was going on. And she didn't want to lose her job. I don't know if she's working there still. For some reason I want to think she's not. um
Sure.
but yeah, there are people who know stuff. There are plenty of people who know stuff. And at one point, the reward money for finding information that leads to her whereabouts or what happened to her was up to at least $60,000. I mean, I
Mhm.
$60,000, couldn't you? So if I knew stuff, I don't know that I would actually. I don't know. That's kind of like a moral dilemma. Like, would I really take their? I don't know, but it's there for that purpose. It looks like somebody who might need that money and knows something would go. Why are they not going? Because they're afraid. They don't want what happened to perhaps Keeslyn, perhaps Caleb, to happen to them. And clearly something bad happened to Caleb and something not good is happening to Keeslyn, or she would be here with us. Not with us, but with her family.
Yeah, I think that we have received several tips saying that she's in Brackett Ridges.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but there is that very hushed, you just don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And so, maybe anyone with information does have that. I'll be next, so I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
keep quiet. Brackett Ridges is an area that Keeslyn would have been very familiar with. I've been there, and I
Mm-hmm.
will say, for me, it felt like probably one of the most unwelcoming areas that I have ever been in.
You could,
Um,
right? You could feel the energy there.
Yes, there's something about it. It's, not people. I'm not saying that
Yeah.
people are friendly. I don't, I didn't see a lot of people, but
Yeah.
there was just it was a heaviness in the air. You just didn't want to be there. You've done a lot more area, or I'm sorry, a lot more in that area than I ever could have done. Can you tell us a little about being there and, the people that you've encountered who've kind of shared their experiences with you of Brackett Ridges?
Oh, yeah. And Tammy, who's not with us today, but she works on this case with us. She is currently talking to a lady whose grandfather previously owned a large part of the Brackett Ridges. And she's like telling Tammy, I believe this is where she is, and you just need to get in there. Multiple people have talked about a well that needs to be investigated, like probably more than one body's in there. Um, if I, again, it's not me, but if I owned any part of Brackett Ridge or one section, I would be so welcoming. Come through here, bring your dogs, bring your people 2 feet apart, and just walk the whole area. I don't know how big it is. It's pretty big, but I think that something like that would be good. Just do that walk, get it over with, and see what's there. Check out wherever this well is. I mean, if I owned the well, I'd probably already have a team out there myself, independent of law, with or without law enforcement, figuring out what's going on there. I don't know. It has a really bad reputation. It has for many, pardon me, many years been a place where um, people believe drug things are happening, other illegal things are happening out there, and there are so many people who talk about it. But we have not, and I'll speak, I hope I can speak for you too. We have not been able to figure out how to get in there or how to get that search, or, to make things start happening. But I think it would be really, really good if we could get out there, or if law enforcement
Yeah.
out there. And
I think I believe Eric went there and searched a well. I don't think that he was welcomed, but I
mhm,
think he did it anyway. Is I believe what he told us in our initial interview with him was that he went out there and just did it.
yeah,
Um, very very brave.
yeah,
Another area of interest is Selvage Street in Dalton.
hmm,
Um, we do know that a few months after her disappearance, I believe 4 months, Keeslyn's cell phone called her dad's number. Can you tell us a little about that call?
yeah. What I recall about this is Eric was stating, and he went there. He went from basically door to
Mhm.
door, figuring out where it come from, and no one, of course, claimed that they knew her, that she'd been there, anything else. I think he got a little trouble out there. I think somebody wanted to run him off, and that could have been related or unrelated. But he said that he heard children playing, laughing, or whatever in the background. So there were kids there, but no one that claimed that they knew her. And am I correct that whoever called didn't speak? Right, that he just heard the background noises.
Yeah, it was background noise only, and I believe the number called twice.
Hmm. Yeah, and
Mhm.
her phone was
Tried
never.
to call back.
Yeah, and nobody knows where her phone is.
Yeah.
Could have been another somebody who got her number, like maybe it had went unpaid for a certain amount of time because it was a prepay, I believe. So the number could have been reissued out, or it could have been her or somebody with her phone.
Yeah, so if it was a reissue of a number, then her contacts would not have gone with it. And it would have had to have been the actual
True.
phone
True.
with dad in there as a point of contact.
You're right. So I forgot that very important detail. So
Yeah.
it could have been someone who had her phone, had ended up with her phone, or it could have been her herself.
Well, we do know from the timeline that at some point she took her phone took a screenshot of a conversation that she was having through Snapchat. And so that was around that same time period. So someone, it seems, had Keeslyn's phone.
Hmm.
Um, we went to Selvage.
Hmm.
Tammy was with us.
Hmm.
We found the house that the call probably came from, so it's kind of hard to tell from a cell tower ping, but we were given the approximates. It's somewhere in these numbers. And it wasn't a bad neighborhood at all, but it looked like there might have been a lot of rentals there, in
Yeah.
the area. And so it would have been hard to keep up with who lived there and when they left. I mean, we pulled tax records to see who owns the houses. But you're definitely left with questions about who made that call and how did they have Keeslyn's phone?
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, there are resources that we don't have that law enforcement
Mhm.
has that make it so much easier for us, but neither one of us are without resources. We have been able to find things that um your average person probably couldn't find because, as writers, reporters, whatever, we have these contacts. And there's so many things that I wish we could say. I wish we could name some names and say, hey, what about this person? And then maybe we would get someone coming back. But we don't have that liberty because without knowing for sure, we don't want to throw names out there and make people suspicious of someone who might be innocent. And that,
Yeah, definitely don't wanna I don't wanna, muddy someone's name, definitely don't want to, step in the way of law enforcement, but it's hard when you have your theories and you feel so strongly about them and,
mhm.
you just wish that you could put everybody that loves Keeslyn and cares for her case into one room and say, "Okay, let's compare notes."
Yes.
Just to try to kinda stay neutral and stay out of the way.
Mhm.
It's almost I mean, there's just a you just feel kind of, at mercy of those in charge that are supposed to be doing their work, and you just hope they're doing their work.
And we hope that they are. And sometimes when
Mhm.
we think they're not, and then there were times like with the car and the phone records, I feel like that was a balls drop. But there are other things, and maybe they are following up. Maybe they know something that we don't know on a bigger level, and they're just not going to tell us because they don't want us to. When I say us, I mean the public. Um,
Right.
Pretty
Right.
much the standard is if you ask for an update, the case is still open and we will follow leads when they come to us. So we hope that that's happening. And in the meantime, we're following our own leads. And God willing, maybe someone will watch this podcast and send a message to us, the police, or whatever, because the case is, we're told, still open. Although at one point it was like, there's no crime. We can't prove that any crime has been committed. So there is no case. But there is a case because we have a missing girl. That's
Yeah.
enough of a case. Like you said earlier, it's a missing person case, not a criminal case. But let's be honest, it's probably a criminal case.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's definitely, there's been crimes committed on what level, who knows.
Hmm.
But there's definitely there's foul play involved in different aspects and in different areas, and so yeah, you just hope that comes to light, and that there's some kind of answers for the family. That's, this poor family, they just want some answers.
They do, and I have seen them from the beginning up until now, and it has taken a toll on their health. You,
Mm,
I can't say for sure, but well, I want to say health, but well-being has certainly taken a toll on their well-being, and you can see it as you could with anyone who's missing a daughter, a son, a mom, a dad, or whoever, and you don't have answers. You don't know where they are or if they could possibly come back someday. And I hope Keeslyn can come back and start healing from what all happened. But if worst case scenario, something bad happened to her and she's not going to come back, we still need those answers.
yeah.
And honestly, for them and for the community to heal, more importantly for the family to heal
Mm,
and people who loved us. But many of us who didn't know her then are invested, and just want the very best to happen. And then you
yeah.
have these people who are doing things they shouldn't be doing that really need to be stopped from doing those things. So there's so many
Yeah.
years.
Yeah, because you can almost guarantee it's not a one-hit wonder. People who commit crimes often continue to commit crimes until they're stopped, and so you've got to
Yeah.
wonder who's out there and what are they doing.
Yeah. And quite frankly, I've heard so many things and been given so many tips. It's like, whoa, I know bad things happen, but I didn't really think about how many bad things happen here in North Georgia, whether
Mhm.
it's Gordon, Whitfield, Murray, whatever county you're with. It's like there's stuff going on out here, and there's a lot of really bad things going on. And it's sad.
Mm. Well, Connie, you're going to be back with us next week, along with Tammy Painter Parker, who's kind of been your trusty sidekick throughout this journey. I'm really looking forward to the three of us sharing some details about our own experiences. We're going to talk about um, looking for Keeslyn. We'll discuss details that we've received from a few intermediaries, but I'll be sharing about being on the ground, looking, for
Yeah.
clues as to where she might be. So, just really, glad to have you back. Glad to have Tammy,
Thank you.
and we're gonna dig deeper.
Sounds great to me.
Well, thanks to all our listeners for your support as we celebrate milestones that are only happening because of you. If you want to support our work, you can do so by visiting our Buy Me a Coffee page at buymeacoffee.com/curious conversations. And as always, if you love our podcast, be sure to subscribe. We want you to share it with a friend. And if you have something curious you'd like to share or an idea for an upcoming episode, send us an email at ourcuriouspodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you.